So I just got done watching the first John Wick spinoff ever called the Continental. It's a 3-episode miniseries on Peacock, and yes, it is very rated R and gory and bloody, and I was all for it. And very much it's if you took Guy Ritchie meets Tarantino for the John Wick world, which I was all sold on that, absolutely. So I'm very excited to talk about this show because honestly going in, I had some pretty low expectations. The trailers didn't really grab my attention, and honestly, out of all the John Wick characters, out of all the John Wick elements, this was personally my least interesting thing that you could spin off into. I love the world building of John Wick, but capturing Winston into his past, I don't know how that's gonna work, and damn was I wrong, because Winston is a fabulous character that they explore even more of, that now I have a bigger appreciation for now when I go back to watch any of the other John Wick films. But alongside that, you learn a lot about other characters in the John Wick world that we've never met before, and honestly, I'm here to say that they are even better than Winston. In fact, I hope they continue this series, spinning it out and touching on these characters, because this 1970s throwback to old school action films with very much the highly stylized action of John Wick, it's fantastic to see. Very excited to talk about the show, but I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section, so leave your thoughts down there. What's your favorite John Wick film, as well as hit that like and subscribe button for more content like this over here on a daily basis. And as just a reminder, this is a non-spoiler review for the entire series. I have seen all 3 episodes. I will be very vague when it comes down to this because you don't want to fall into any twists or turns. Pretty much just going to vent about how awesome the show is as a whole. Like I mentioned, this is a 3-part event which will explore the origins behind the iconic hotel for assassin centerpiece of the John Wick universe called the Continental. It comes through the eyes and actions of a young Winston Scott, who we all know Winston from the original series, as he's dragged in the hellscape of 1970s New York to face a past he thought he'd left behind. And it stars very much a lot of unknowns that I've never personally seen before, but one of the most prolific people in here is Mel Gibson. Oh, Mel Gibson is a villain to a lot of people in the real world, but Mel Gibson is playing the villain in this series. And well, that's where I kind of want to start with is my pros for this series, and that's very much all the performances. I guess if I'm mentioning the performances, let's start out with that for my pros, and flat out, Colin Woodell does a great job bringing to life Ian McShane's Winston Scott. And that was actually one of the things, when he started, I was like, I don't see Ian McShane's character in here whatsoever. But after the first 5 minutes, he kicks in, he has those mannerisms down, but at the same time bringing to life this character. So it does feel pretty seamless that this would be a younger version of him. And I overall really dug it. And specifically the emotional avenues that you see for this character. Because when it comes down to the John Wick world, I feel like that we don't really come to these films for the story. It very much more is for the action. The story kind of always takes a back ride, but what is throughout the entire film is mythology and world building. And the Continental kind of has a splash of everything. It has a splash of a lot of action, a splash of emotion to the story, and a splash of course, world building as well, and Winston gets a lot of world building within himself. There's a lot more history to the Continental, specifically in how the Winston came into all of it, and trust me, by the 3rd episode, I mean, the 3rd episode is just freaking flat out incredible. I'm getting ahead of myself because we're not talking about that. I also want to talk about Michelle Prada, who probably is my favorite character in this entire series. She plays KD. Not going to get much into her, but she's a very fascinating character, and I really love what they ended up doing with her throughout the entire series. And alongside Hubert Johr and Jessica Allen, I thought were phenomenal in this as Lou and Miles. For me, they have some of the best action set pieces in here. The style and everything to their nature really brought these characters to life, and if it wasn't for Katie, Jessica Allen's character, Lou, would hands down be my favorite character of the entire series. I'm remiss if I didn't talk about Neon Kate, who I thought was fantastic as Yen as well. Again, a very interesting character that I really love a lot of the action set pieces that she has. And then a Yamide Edegood, who plays Charon, who we all know is the younger version of Lance Reddick's character. Rest in peace to Lance. He's amazing in that role. He's fantastic, and the list goes on and on through this with all these different characters and all these different people. But what I will say is that every single actor, every single character they bring in here, specifically these like assassins that are like Hansel and Gretel, are just bonkers wild, and again adds to the flair, adds to the world of John Wick. And that's what I was really appreciative of, was the world building. Now, I would say there's not a lot more development into this, but what they actually do is really much, since there's so many characters, you get to see different aspects of 1970s New York City within the world of Assassins. And I really like how, while John Wick has very much fallen into a fantasy action genre, this very much keeps it a little bit more grounded, while, of course, that highly stylized, over-the-top 1970s films that you would know, you see here as well. And each and every one of these characters represents a different area of the world of John Wick, and something that, again, I don't think we've seen. Specifically, one of these characters really is on the outside of it all and isn't a part of this assassin underworld, but how do you get into that, and how does it bring people in? And just seeing small little notices of that and how they were able to bring a character and segue them into this world made me very interested to it all, to see how they were able to bring that to life, because again, that's not something that we've seen in the John Wick world yet. But when you come to anything with John Wick, you do want great action, and I think that's actually been the one thing that I've been very hesitant on anytime they've announced the spin-off. They're doing this thing with Ana de Armas called The Ballerina next year. Still pretty hesitant on that until I see how the action's filmed, because John Wick for me is the quintessential best action franchise of the last decade. And when it comes down to freaking action set pieces and the way that hand-to-hand combat is shown, John Wick is at the top of some of the best action scenes of all time, so you gotta follow that up. Whether it's in this other spinoff they have coming in next year called The Ballerina, or of course now the Continental series, I need that action to be shown in a great way, and it is. The Continental probably has some of my favorite action set pieces within this world, within this franchise, and specifically within really much the last few years. I mean, with John Wick Chapter 4 coming out earlier this year, there are some action sequences throughout the series that actually even rival those. They're not as big on scale, because obviously it is a more TV show, it's a smaller in scale, but when it comes down to hand-to-hand combat, the way that they fluidly move the camera, it is excellent. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this is very over the top. It has a 1970s flair. It's not to the modern day kind of vibe that John Wick gives. There is a different style to this all. And like I mentioned, Tarantino's name at the top of this, it's like if Tarantino made one of these, because everything is just to 100. Even up to Cormac, who's played by Mel Gibson, his performance is very much over-exaggerated, and I was okay with that. It took me a second to get into the tone of that, and maybe it's not going to work for everybody, but I really dug how they were able to emphasize that all and give all these great action set pieces. Just like, there's one in here with like a theater seat, and the way that the theater seat is used as a weapon, and I just sat there like, what are they doing? And it just gets elevated from there. Every episode has a standout moment, or standout moments. Since it's an hour and a half, you pretty much get these mini movies in the John Wick universe, and every single episode has multiple different action scenes with amazing mic drop sequences. And of course, when I talk about mic drop sequences, I mean musical mic drop sequences, because the music that they have to a lot of these different sequences just make you want to get up and keep replaying the scene over and over, and I loved it. In fact, I don't have a single issue when it comes down to the action set pieces itself. I found each and every one of them to be fluid, awesome, and memorable. Till you see the next action sequence, and that's the one that's stuck in your head for the rest of the day. Because honestly, within the third episode itself, there are some of the best action set pieces in TV that I've seen in quite a while. Again, when it comes down to TV, these are some of the top tier action sequences, and I get a little bit more hope now with the Ballerina movie. I hope that they can up the ante and show it all, because it's not gung fu, it's not John Wick. You actually get to see different types of fighting styles in here, and that's what I love. I love seeing Keanu Reeves kick ass, don't get me wrong, but I love when we get to see other assassins in the world, like Kane within John Wick Chapter 4, and how he fights. And since you have so many different characters in here, you get to see so many different styles of fighting, and it's badass to say the least. The one thing I haven't really talked about is the story, and while I don't have any major cons to this entire series, I do feel that the story at times can be a little bit of a mixed bag. Not because it's bad, but at times you can definitely feel the pacing, and while it's only a 3-episode miniseries, I actually kind of wish they would have either paced it out to be 6 episodes, or kind of just moved everything a little bit more together and more conjoined. Now, it's just a couple moments and a couple subplots that I don't really feel like get completely tied up, and since this is a mini-series, I would have liked a little bit more of an essence to that, or even to give a little background context. I actually wish, again, okay, you're showing this story, but then you have all these other fantastic characters. Why not spin it into this next thing? Okay, if this does good, we can go to this next character and focus on that background, because that's kind of what I would have liked. Now, I am happy that a lot of people got development in here, but some feel just a little bit short-sighted in its side. Again, makes the pacing feel a little bit lackluster, a tad bit too slow. But it jumps right back into it, and I can't go as far to say that I didn't like any of the storylines in here. There's just some mixed bag elements that I wish they would have focused in either a bit more on some, and some others kind of just crunched up a little bit less. Continental's awesome. It's one of the most entertaining TV shows that I've watched this year. It's Tarantino meets Guy Ritchie kind of filmmaking style, but thrown into the John Wick world, and that is exactly what I would have loved to see. It's very much, again, I wasn't born in the 1970s. I am very young, so I'm not totally prolific. A lot of films from that era, but any of the films I have seen, you can definitely feel the vibe and inspiration from those, and I think 1970s fans of action films are going to get a lot more out of the series than I did, and I think people who just want to learn more about the John Wick world are in store for a lot of greatness. All that said, I'm going to give the Continental a B+. Thank you so much again, guys, for watching this. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and comment down below your guys' thoughts, and of course, until next time, stay classy.